Hey everyone, I'm JarekTheGamingDragon, and this is Cruel. Cruel is part of a growing subgenre that we don't have an adopted name for. Like, obviously it's a first-person shooter, but it's a subgenre of first-person shooters. The most common accepted term for this style of game I've heard is void-likes. And I don't really like that because it makes it sound more like you're saying these are clones of Post-Void. Post-Void was what sort of kicked off this whole subgenre, so I guess that's fair, but it was also kind of like when we called everything Doom clones. I would prefer a proper name for the subgenre. And I know what you're probably going to say, yes, I'm sort of the one that popularized the term Half-like, but I feel like that's a little different as it sounds like Half-Life rolls off the tongue and it's catchy. The Post-Void devs actually do have a name for this style of game. They call them corridor shooters, which I also don't really like, because corridor shooter is something we use to describe games that were boring in the mid-2000s. If you tell me a game is a corridor shooter, I think of a game that has a bunch of invisible walls and repetitive enemies, and it just isn't very good. Like, it sounds negative. This term was used most commonly at the end of modern military shooters when everything was trying to be Call of Duty, but they weren't any good. The two names I've heard that I like the most are booter shooter and first-person booter. Now, booter shooter is the better name in my opinion, but since it sounds so similar to boomer shooter, that might cause some confusion. Plus, you're always going to have that one guy that pops in out of nowhere going, "Did you just call it a booter shooter, idiot? It's called a boomer shooter." Because, you know, there's always that one guy that's confidently incorrect. So first-person booter, I think, is the better term to use here because you can't cause any confusion and you can shorten it to FPB. Wait, hold on. Is there already a negative annotation to that acronym? Let me do a quick Google check. Frankfurt Plant Board. Okay, no, there's nothing. We're good. Anyway, now that I got that out, you probably already know what the gameplay consists of for Cruel. You kick open doors and kill enemies as fast as possible. You can take a little bit of time, but there's a wall of fire behind you, so you better keep going. It doesn't really feel like I'm pressured that much with time, but it is there. You do have to keep moving forward. As you progress throughout the levels, more enemies are introduced, and you have to prioritize the bigger threats. That's what these games are about at their core, but they all feel so differently because their weapons and enemies are so different. So are the upgrades you get. Usually these games are very simple on the tech side as well, so you shouldn't have any problem running them. And Cruel is no different. This game runs on the Godot Engine, which I didn't expect. I don't usually associate that engine with really good games. I was running this game at 600 to 1000 FPS. You'll be fine running this game. Oddly enough, there's like no settings here. Like, that's it. That's all you got. Thankfully, important settings like the ability to change your controls are there, so that's nice. The actual graphics of this game, as you probably have already commented about, look a lot like Blood. I mean, some of these are just enemies from Blood. This is one of the things I've really noticed about the subgenre. They go out there when it comes to graphics. You have Post-Void, Mullet Mad Jack, Angerfoot, Cruel. None of these games look alike at all. And I wouldn't want any of them to change their style. I love how all of these games look. They are unique. Post-Void can give people headaches, though. Maybe I'll make a video of that in the future if you're interested. Anyway, like I said, you don't have many options. Once you change your controls, you click Start New Game, and that's pretty much all you can do. The tutorial on the bottom right is literally just telling you the controls. I will say the moment I launched this game, I knew it was going to be a quality title. The main menu music and the animation behind it, clearly love was put into this game. In fact, the music is pretty darn good. When you start a new game, Cruel immediately asks you a question. Who would you want to kill? Kind of a loaded question, but I sat there and I thought about it for a little bit and then put in the first thing that came to mind. Oh, what game do I hate? Alright, Chaser. And from here, you're on. You have no more cutscenes throughout the game, you're just killing enemies. The first weapon you get is a revolver that is way more satisfying than it should be. That headshot noise is just so crunchy for a revolver that doesn't even seem to be a higher magnum caliber. The default enemy are just blood cultists. I'm here for it. But at the end of every level, you have the choice to choose from a card. These cards will give you passive upgrades. To be honest, none of them really change the game dramatically, and I'll talk about this later. The next weapon you'll get is a double barrel shotgun. This thing was my workhorse. I used it more than any other weapon in the game. It's very strong, it's a double barrel shotgun. Also, I would just love to point out that even though this game doesn't have any actual reload animations, shotgun shells and casings and magazines and the sound effects make the reloading still very satisfying. I mean, think of Time Splitters 2 did this. I wouldn't even care that there wasn't reload animations at that point. It's a super simple yet very clever way to cover up having to do more work for reloading animations just by saying this is good enough. And it is. This is good enough. Anyway, the third weapon you get is your only automatic. It's less accurate, but very useful for spray and pray. The enemies you fight along the way are pretty varied, because for some reason everything wants to kill you. Not just humans, but crows, monkeys, and spiders too. Yeah, the crows caught me off guard for a little while, but they don't do much damage and they die after they hit you, or you just shoot them. So, amusing enough variety there. One enemy I found particularly annoying were the riot units. You see, like most other games like this, you have your almighty boot. This boot, however, is not very strong. You don't kill enemies by booting them, you just knock them over. Unless you kick them out a window. Never gets old. There's even a card that will give you armor via a frying pan on your chest if you kick people out windows. You do have a regular melee, which will be a not very powerful fist, but if you pick up a melee weapon, this is something you're going to want to use a lot. These melee weapons will break on their own if used too much, and if you throw them, it's very strong, but it will break automatically. This forces you to constantly search for new melee weapons, which aren't usually too far. Now, ammo in this game is somewhat scarce. Not quite horror game levels, but you should conserve your ammo when you can. So melee weapons are important. Well, back to what I was saying about the riot units. Up until they show up, headshots were the way to go. However, they have helmets and you can't headshot them. You also can't melee them because they have armor. You can knock them down with a kick, but that's not going to kill them. You have to shoot these guys in the body. This can put you into some real bad places if you're not paying attention. Then there's the TNT units, which I don't really have many complaints about, but since the maps are so cramped, you're probably gonna die to these guys once or twice. God damn it. That's so unfortunate. Sometimes you're just a low health and one of them are too close for you to avoid damage in any way whatsoever, and that can feel a bit unfair, but it's pretty rare. There will also be traps throughout the map. For example, landmines or claymores. These are pretty easy. You can slide underneath landmines to avoid taking damage or just jump over the claymores. You can also just shoot them to kill enemies nearby. But then there's also these laser things that block your path, and I don't really like these very much. They sort of break the flow. You have to sit there and wait for them to open up. And if you're on time and there's fire behind you and you're just sitting there waiting for the laser, that also has to feel bad. I don't know. They're not really that big of an issue, but I'm not really a fan. Cruel is only 10 levels, which doesn't sound like a lot, but this game is also only $10, and there's other alternate game modes that add a lot of replayability. Well, I guess replayability isn't the correct word because it changes how the game plays entirely. More importantly though, when you beat that 10th level, there's a cutscene with a twist. It was the dog. Why would I kill a dog? A dog is the only thing that would keep me from killing Chaser. Unfortunately, by clicking this, I didn't unlock the other game mode. As of right now, there is a bug where if you spare the dog, it doesn't unlock the other game mode. You have to kill the dog. You were actively punishing me for not killing a dog. What the hell, man? Looking on Twitter, this is not intentional, so I imagine it might be fixed before this video even goes up. So I made a new run, I called the dog Hunt down the Freeman, and then I killed it. Once you get the hang of this game, it actually ends up feeling pretty darn easy. That is not what I can say about the secondary game mode you unlock for beating the game. That secondary game mode is the unarmed game mode. This is also not the hardest thing in the world, but it's definitely more difficult than the base game mode. But duh, you don't have guns. There's one mechanic I've neglected to mention, and that's the fact that you can parry bullets, and this is very satisfying. Every enemy in the game has a very distinct animation before they shoot at you. It makes timing your parries very easy, but there's also projectile speed, so it's actually kind of more difficult to parry projectiles the further away you are, because you can rely less on that animation and you have to visually rely on the bullet flying at you. Either way, once you get parrying down, it's pretty simple and very satisfying. Beating the unarmed mode will unlock 1 HP mode, and I don't know, that's honestly kind of disappointing. I was expecting something that changed the gameplay a little more than just you don't have health. All of that said, I do have some constructive criticism. The first one is that at the end of the 10th floor, there's no boss. It's just a more difficult floor than the other ones. Apparently there was a boss at one point, but the dev wasn't happy with it, so he's still working on that. Or maybe it'll never be added back in, I don't know. Need to clarify, this is not an early access game. All the stuff here is very solidly done. The next complaint to have is that some of the hitboxes are a little weird. Melee hitboxes seem a lot smaller than they should be, and so do the headshot hitboxes. You definitely need to be pretty precise when you're playing this game. But by far the biggest bit of constructive criticism I can give this game is that cards don't change gameplay enough. What do I mean by that? Well, you get cards at the end of each round, but they mostly are passive buffs. Very few of them actually force you to change how you play. A good example is that one of the cards will give your boot an explosion if your combo meter is up. You get a combo per every enemy you kill, unless you take damage and then it resets. So this incentivizes you to push this combo so you can use your almighty boot. I want more stuff like this that actually forces me to do something different, activate my brain, and make the gameplay a bit more varied. This is something that these games usually do quite well, and I think it's a little lacking here. But that's cruel. What do I think of it? Well, it's very short, but it's also only $10. The amount of content you have for that price is pretty worth it in my opinion. That said, I wouldn't be willing to put this in the same tier as something like Mullet Mad Jack or Angerfoot. Those two games have raised the bar so far for this subgenre that it's almost unfair comparing Cruel to them. I would put both Mullet Mad Jack and Angerfoot somewhere in between A tier and S tier, whereas I'll put this game somewhere between A tier and B tier. Still fun, still definitely worth it if you're looking for something to waste your time on, but I don't think it's the next game of the year. Regardless, it is a good addition to the first-person booter subgenre. A big thanks to my YouTube members. It really means a lot that people will just chuck money my way to keep making this content. I couldn't do it without you, especially with how unreliable YouTube income can be sometimes. If you want to check out some of my other stuff, you can look at the stuff on screen. I got a big playlist of videos like this, or check the recommended thing that YouTube thinks you like. If you want to see more of my videos, then click subscribe. Thank all of you for watching, and I'll see you next time.